All right. Well, welcome everyone. This is Dave McCusker coming to you live from MPH on a cold November afternoon.
Yes, or don't bother.
This is part of our MPH Conversations series, and we try to offer some insights and expertise in various areas. So we're really excited about this afternoon's presentation. And I'm going to ask just a couple of housekeeping things. I'm going to ask everyone to put themselves on mute. That would be helpful. We are, I think, according to my colleague Will, we're going to have a little Q&A toward the end of this session. So if we all stay on mute, that'd be fantastic. I also just want to let folks know that we're going to record this session for the sake of posterity, and also we may be able to repurpose this in other ways. So just keep that in mind. And with that, I'm going to be short on my intro to our co-host, Matt, who I just met. I know Will and Matt are old friends. I'm grateful to Matt for joining us, but I'm going to just turn things over to my colleague and someone who's been at MPH for a long time, our Director of College Counseling, among other roles that he plays, Will Cardamone, and say thank you to Will for doing this. Appreciate the extra time and effort. And it's all yours now, Will. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the introduction, Dave, and welcome everyone out there. We're really happy that you're here to join us tonight. I am so lucky to have my old friend and colleague, Matt Malatesta, joining us this evening to kind of give the college perspective on things. Matt and I worked together back in the day at Hamilton College in the admission office, and Matt's gone on to be the VP of Enrollment and Financial Aid admissions at Union College. So I guess I'm lucky to have friends in high places. Matt, has a lot of demands on his time, obviously, with everything going on, particularly at this time of the year, the admissions cycle. So we're thrilled that he's willing to spend an hour with us this afternoon. So thanks again, Matt, and we'll have you done in time to go upstairs and have dinner with Maggie and the kids, I promise.
That sounds good. Yeah, so everything's fine until you call me your old friend. So that's fine. That's fine.
So I think I need to give a COVID disclaimer before we get started. Obviously, Matt and I have been talking about college admissions and are happy to share our expertise. But, given the incredibly fast changing reality that we're in currently, I think it's important to understand that some of the things that Matt and I say tonight that we're saying is kind of, the basic ground rules of college admissions could change, and we need to be flexible. And I just wanted to give that disclaimer. We'll give you what we know right now, and we'll see what happens tomorrow. That's kind of the reality we're dealing with, and so we'll do our very best to give you the most honest and straightforward answers we can given the circumstances. And, Matt and I have done a number of talks through the years as panelists at college admission conferences. And most of those presentations were to a fairly homogeneous audience. And tonight, I don't know exactly who's on currently, but it may be a fairly wide-ranging group of folks who have slightly different priorities and have children that are either in the process or a long ways from the process or went through the process a long time ago. So Matt and I are going to leave quite a bit of time at the end for questions and answers to make sure that all of your questions and concerns are addressed and answered as we work our way through our presentation. All right. So with that as kind of backdrop, I'm assuming everybody can see my screen, my PowerPoint that we've put together for you. And really, when Matt and I were talking about what we wanted to discuss was that, colleges and universities have been a cornerstone of American society pretty much since the founding of the country. Colleges and universities are such an important part of our society. The higher education system in this country is so highly regarded across the globe. And college admissions is a strong profession, a strong industry. And although it has had to adapt and change due to COVID, a lot of the things about college admissions that make it great and make it a wonderful entry point into higher education remain the same. So we thought we'd really kind of talk about some of the things that we've just had to change due to COVID and others that really remain the same in college admissions, and thought really that would be kind of the premise of our talk. So under biggest change, at least from my side at this point in the cycle, is that, normally during the fall, I have many of my seniors and indeed some of my juniors starting to visit college campuses, and that's pretty much gone away, with a few exceptions of colleges that have tried to do some campus programming tours and information sessions with visitors. Most campuses have not been able to do that. It just hasn't been realistic or safe or feasible. And so students and parents have had to adapt to learning about college campuses virtually. Matt, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the things Union has done to enhance that experience for families?
Yeah, well, first of all, just so you know, Will brought in some great experience here because, so Union's been around for 225 years, and this is not our first pandemic. We were around for the last pandemic as well. I might have been a little bit before my time, so I've only known a little bit, but the institution has known both. I mean, for us, it's interesting. I was just on a call with some colleagues earlier today, and I was talking about how much life has changed between kind of March and now. And Union actually was one of the first colleges in the country to have an employee test for COVID. I don't know if people were paying attention at the time, but we had someone test positive for COVID, one of the first colleges that happened at, not the first, but one of the first. And it was, scramble to get everyone off campus and home and back again. And the fact that we just completed a successful term, where we have 3 terms in the year. Our fall term classes just ended on Tuesday, and we did that, with 85% of our students in residence. If we did not see the possibility of that in March, the world has changed greatly. We had 23,000 tests of students. We test students and people on campus once a week, and we've had 28 total positive cases all term. So it's been kind of miraculous with that. But in light of all that is going on, is my team and much of what we do from an admissions perspective is try to help people understand the opportunities that await them here at Union virtually, whether it's interviews or whether it's campus tours or whether it's online college fairs or whether it's, we have had some ability for some people to visit. Like New York's like the only state you can do that from. There's all sorts of, we follow New York state restrictions, and we've allowed a few people to visit over time, but those are limited opportunities for sure. And what I've found is virtually people in really different spaces. And so what we've had to do is create a lot of different kinds of experiences, because some students, well, first of all, I'm living this both personally and professionally. I got a daughter who's a first year student here at Union. So she saw it last year as all these campuses had to close down. And my oldest son is a junior in high school. So to try to get high school students to engage in this is, normally you can trap them in the car and drive them to a college campus and say, we're now looking at colleges. Now it's a little bit of a, hey, how about you go up and you check out their virtual tour? But what I found is different students respond to different things. Like some want the one-on-one, like we have the opportunity for an interview, but some students are like, no, I'd much rather like just show up and get a pre-recorded, information session and things like that. So not unique to Union, but if you look at websites, there's a lot of different ways to learn about these colleges. And I think the challenge for, the students for sure, and the parents of the students, is to try to talk to them, okay, what schools are on your list and what opportunities are at each of those schools, and what are you literally going to engage with? Like, how do you trap them in the virtual car and make them engage with us? I just think it's important. It's an easy thing not to do. It's an easy thing to kind of go back. It's just and what's a challenge is it's just another Zoom call. You know what I mean? Like, and they're spending a lot of time on screen, so it's not easy to do, but you almost have to make the time for them to make it happen. That for me is my biggest worry, is that, you know, already students, even the brightest students in the country, this process can happen at them a little bit more than it should, and, you know, try to get them to engage is the challenge.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm feeling that on my end for sure, Matt. And I'm hearing from my students that, you know, after they've done a couple of virtual campus visits or virtual visits with admission officers who visited us virtually this year, it does sound a lot the same. And it's a challenge to get them to get excited about getting on another Zoom visit. That's just the reality we're in. And hopefully the reality will change before too long. But just for the sake of time, and I want to try to get through our slides, we'll move on to the next item, which has obviously been a ground-shaking event in our profession, is that because so many members of the class of 2021 have been unable to sit for standardized tests because of school closures and test sites having to cancel tests and so forth. You know, the vast majority of four-year colleges in this country have just waived that requirement. Now, I know, Matt, that Union prior to COVID was a test optional school.
About time those other places caught up to us, Will.
What's that?
It's about time those other places caught up to us.
And indeed, over half of the MPH class of 2021 will apply to college, and it might be more because there are some students who have yet to apply. They didn't apply in the early rounds. Will apply to college without reporting any test scores. They, for a variety of reasons, whether it was they weren't able to get a test taken because of COVID, or they took a test and they didn't feel like it was a good representation of their ability. So do you want to talk a little bit about, you know, does test optional really mean test optional, Matt? I think there is some skepticism among parents and high school students.
Well, I always say, you know, colleges are sick, but we're not sadistic. Like, you know, if we wanted to require the testing, we would require it, even under these times. And frankly, some colleges have continued to do that. Is, you know, as you said, Union's been a test optional place, predates my time here as the vice president. So they've been going on close to 20 years as a test optional institution. If we don't have testing on a student, it's just one less piece of information in the puzzle of what we're trying to put together. We don't try to guess at what the test score was going to be, you know, and what I think that's so worrying to people, but I think it's a false worry from the perspective of, you know, we don't have the same amount of information on every applicant, you know, and so it's not just like we have every bit of information, oh, and this kid doesn't have testing. It's for some students, we have a very good sense of where they rank in the class of their high school class. For other schools, maybe MPH being an example, we don't have a good read about who is, you know, number 1 and who's number 7 and who's number 14. For some places, there's a kind of a very clear difference in the levels of rigor of coursework that's offered. At a place like MPH that actually has a lot of rigor across the board, you know, that's something that starts with. So in some ways, you know, we always have different pieces of information about different applicants. Everyone talks about holistic admissions, trying to look at all these pieces together. And for some students, we will have testing as piece of that puzzle. For others, we won't. But that doesn't mean, you know, that's good or bad. It's for different people, it's going to play out in different ways, you know, and this is already a process that's not terribly predictable, you know, so in some ways, will it make your job difficult in terms of the advice you get? And, but I don't know, in some ways, I think it's a good thing. Like, I think
well, certainly it's a stress reducer for many of my students who feel like, boy, I've worked really hard in my high school classes and I've earned good grades, and for whatever reason, getting in a gymnasium on a Saturday morning and filling in these bubbles, and I don't take a lot of standardized tests because I'm at an independent school, so I don't have Regents exams and things like that. It just is the anxiety is through the roof around the standardized testing. So when that piece of it was taken off the table, it was a real exhale for our students, which is a healthy thing. And I think really the most interesting question is long term after COVID. and hopefully that'll be soon, right? That will testing come back particularly for large universities, or are we as an industry and a profession moving past the idea that every student has to have an SAT or an ACT to apply to college? I think that as colleges get accustomed to reviewing applications without standardized testing, many of them that have gone test optional for this year will remain test optional going forward.
Yeah, I think if colleges do their homework, which is looking at students who come to them without testing and see how they've done. Like one of my, union prides itself on, research and what students do. And one of my favorite research projects was a senior a few years back did her senior thesis on measuring how students who came to union giving us their standardized testing did compared to those who did not. And her research shows what a lot of national research shows is if you can kind of control for the high school transcript, the high school, what did they do in the classroom? Then there is no difference. And I think some colleges will have a nice opportunity to see that's actually true on their campuses. Frankly, in some ways, it's a shorthand that obviously advantages certain people. That'll be nice for colleges to walk away from a little bit. And so I do agree with you. I think probably moving forward, there will at least be an increase in places that are test optional for sure.
Yeah. And I think it's just kind of an interesting side note to mention that the one large state university system, the University of Florida, that still required students in the current senior class to submit test scores, saw in some of the universities within 12 universities within the system, nearly a 50% drop in applications, at least up until this point in the cycle. And the regents of the University of Florida are furiously trying to figure out if they need to waive the requirement because their applicant pool has thus far been diminished greatly.
And they undermine my point that colleges are sick, not sadistic. Like in this day and age, when we know students aren't having the opportunity to test, to still require it. It is a little, if there's any UF grads, I apologize, but it does strike me as bordering on sadistic to kind of expect it this year.
Yeah. I guess the last piece on this slide would be something that, Matt and I know of. We don't talk a lot about it. It's a kind of a frightening prospect that even before COVID, there were colleges that were financially struggling, that couldn't always, enroll a full class and were having to discount their tuition to meet their enrollment targets and so forth. And there is quite a bit of scuttlebutt, at least within the industry, that those schools that are closest on the financial margins may not be able to overcome the loss of revenue, at least for this year and perhaps a little bit into next year. And although I'm not going to name names or anything, there is a likelihood that some of the schools who were struggling the most financially may not make it past COVID. I don't know if you're hearing anything. I'm not asking you to name any schools, Matt, but I know that there's a professor at NYU that published a pretty, well-researched article in the Times identifying schools that were really vulnerable.
Yeah, I don't have any particular names, but we do. I think you look at a time of some reckoning for some colleges. I think there's going to be people who come out of this. This is an existential shock to a lot of systems. It's very like places like Union that are testing every week. It's an incredibly expensive proposition. In terms of students taking leaves, and already the demographics of the country were working against colleges, both in terms of increased need of applicants coming to the table and less high school graduates. So no, I think in the coming years, there's going to be some places that are finding incredible pressures as a result of it. In fact, as a campus, we talk about it's not just kind of surviving COVID as an institution, it's thriving during it. And that's something where people have got to kick the tires about, because, people on this call, I'm guessing most of your children will be going to college post, the problematic time next fall with the good news that's coming out with vaccines. Next fall will be life back to relative normalcy on most college campuses. So you should be asking colleges, What have you been doing to thrive or to make sure that you hit the ground running next fall?
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about what has remained the same in COVID. And I hope that you can pick up that Matt and I have, have a really warm and cordial relationship. But I would also point out that both Matt and I could probably name 10 or 15 other colleagues that we know who are on the other side of the desk. And that's a really important piece, I think, for families and students to understand that, we're all in this profession because we like working with high school students. Matt, I know, worked on the other side of the desk. And of course, I was on the other side at Hamilton. We like working with families and helping students in a challenging life transition. And it helps that I know I can call Matt or 10 other admission deans who are friends. And we can talk about, working with a student. It's not like we call each other up, say, oh, you must take my student. But I know that I can get a fair read and good counsel from my friends on the other side of the desk. And that collegiality has, I think, even been stronger during COVID. Anything to add, Matt?
I completely agree. No, I mean, I think it's the relationship part of this is really important. And fundamentally, I mean, what we're all hoping for is good matches, is students who are going to find themselves to an institution that's going to serve them well and continue them forward in the success they've seen and launch them to new success. And so what I always worry about in this process is the selectivity piece of this. The tail of selectivity wags the dog of all this way too much. I mean, obviously you want to figure out who will admit your child, but there is some perverse aspect to this process where it's like, if that place is about to reject my child, it must be the perfect place for my child. You know what I mean? And so I think the selectivity thing gets like way out ahead of all the other things. Right. And I think if people can go into it with open minds, and you said something earlier, which I actually think, I know it's not, but it should be a great stress reliever for families. As they've been sitting through these virtual sessions and they go, well, God, they're all starting to sound the same. Well, let me let you in on a secret. They're pretty similar. I mean, there's a lot of really good places out there. And I hope that makes you figure out, I'm going to be probably pretty good wherever I end up. There's not some magic. There is some sense that like people go to Harvard and it's like, it's a life of magic and wonder and happiness. And if you go to Union, it's like the gulag. You'll barely survive the place. I mean, like you can walk around Union, see a bunch of smiling, happy kids. Like life is good, and not everyone is there, and it was not their top choice for every single kid there. Like I think just people, I don't know. It's one of the most worried about parts of for this generation. I so worry about it. Like, and I'm one of the parents. Like we make this seem like such a big decision, and don't get me wrong. I understand it's an important decision. But I fundamentally think it's a hard thing to goof up too much. There's a lot of good places out there. And if people can open their eyes to that and be, they'll be fine. And so ultimately it's about finding the match. And I don't think there's just one. I think there's many.
Thank you. Amen. So that kind of leads naturally into holistic review. I think some parents or students might be a little skeptical about, oh, they're really going to take the time to try to really dig deeply into my file and understand my circumstances and who I am and what I care about. And they're not just thinking about what are my grades and my test scores. Obviously, test scores are kind of out the window this year. But I do think that is a central principle of college admissions that really, regardless of the size of the institution, holistic application review where colleges look at all aspects of the student's application and interactions with the college before making an admission decision. Do you want to comment at all on holistic review, Matt?
No, it's real. I talked to a 25-year-old member of my staff this morning about another topic, and she's in the midst. We have early action, and the team's knee deep in reading early action applications, and it was palpable to her. She reads with a partner, and she and her partner, and she's like, and this is a quote from her, like unprovoked. I don't think she was trying to score favor with her boss. She's like, we're just trying to make enough time for each kid. I mean, like they care about it. I mean, like, we've got to get through it. There are we're a place that's a selective place. There are more applicants to union than we have room for kids to be here. But these colleges are trying to make time for it. But I get it. It's not perfect. You turn a three-dimensional young person into a lot of two-dimensional pieces. I mean, that's actually one place where the pandemic, I think there's an opportunity. I hope students don't lose the advantage of, like, more places are offering interviews than normal, kind of in lieu of testing or other things. Like we've been a place that's always encouraged an interview, but we've always been very understanding that, well, it's hard to schedule. You didn't know you were going to come visit till yesterday. You couldn't get an interview. Well, all our interviews are online this year, and so it's actually quite easy to interview, and it's really advantageous for students to do that. It's not going to, make the dead rise. It's not going to, but it helps us learn more about a student. It helps us add that third dimension to a student. And so I always say to students, like, if you're not borderline catatonic, you should interview. It just helps us learn a little bit more about you. I mean, like, it's not for everybody, but I think it's for most, and I think it helps.
Yeah. No doubt about it. I mean, I certainly encourage students at MPH whenever possible, and particularly this year, with virtual interviews being more available than driving to a campus or setting up an alumni interview in town. If you're interested in the college and they offer an interview, you need to have it. And our students tend to do quite well, so that's great.
We are assuming, I've got a young man who's in the other room right now, and it might be involving Fortnite or something. And you're like, we are assuming they have access to the internet and will have the opportunity to interview. So I'd encourage them.
Yeah. Well, so I would like to point out also that, COVID has caused, all sorts of disruption. But one thing that I'm seeing from my side, Matt, is that the admission cycle for this class is pretty much the admission cycle with similar deadlines around early decision, early action, regular decision. And I'm assuming, Matt, you on the college side are planning to release your admission decisions in a time frame similar to past years?
Yes and no. Like, so I forgot who I was talking to recently. I mean, yes. I mean, the deadlines, we got to get through it, right? So we get about 7,000 applications, which is, we're a small shop, and we've got to get through them. But I think there will be in the process, at least at some institutions, some additional flexibility. I'll just give you an example for us is, our early decision deadline is November 1st. And we basically, on our website, we put that we know people are going to be coming to it later than normal. And so we said, if you know by December 4th that you want to go early decision, you can do that. We don't think it's going to affect a lot of students. And frankly, we don't think a lot of students are even going to notice that we offered it. So there is some opportunity for people to have conversations, like, who is the reader of your area at the schools you're looking at, and if and where there might be something extraordinary or going on, like, hey, I actually now decided it's my first choice. Is it too late? It's worth asking the question. I don't think it's going to come up often. So I think there'll be little things like that along the way.
Yeah, I would say that although deadlines have remained the same, I've noticed a lot of flexibility with colleges in offering extensions and being liberal with granting extensions if, for whatever reason, the student needed it. So, I mean, obviously, with all the kind of unsettled nature and stress in the lives of current high school seniors, I think colleges want to be as accommodating as possible. Right. And I don't want to belabor too much the idea that students need to connect with colleges, but I'm really glad, Matt, that you mentioned that it's important, particularly in the COVID time where you don't have to spend the money and the resources to get in a car and drive to campus, that spending some time on a college website, taking in an information session or a particular program session that's offered, and of course the interview is really important. And then hopefully, maybe in the spring, if all goes well, you guys will be able to welcome students in some fashion to campus for accepted student programs and so forth.
All right. Well, Will, I'm going to drop this. I think it's mostly parents on the call, so I'll drop it to them. I'll let them deliver the bad news to students. But we actually kind of want these turkeys to read our emails. Like, and frankly, normally they don't. Like the email, they don't know what it is. But like they've got to learn about us. And like I feel like we are all more similar than we are different. However, if you look at the emails Union sends and you compare them to the emails that come from Bucknell, you're going to see different themes. And that's what you're going to have to make your decision on. What were the themes I heard from Union? Like I went on the information session for Union and I read 3 emails from Union. These are the 3 or 4 things that they kept talking about. That must be important to them. And it's not like you're going to go to Bucknell and it's going to say, you know, we don't value the life of the mind, which I don't think they really do. No, I'm just kidding. That's fine place. But what are the themes that you heard at Bucknell? What are the themes you heard at Union? What are the themes you heard at Boston University? You know, but we know, you know, they're not reading half the stuff we send them.
Yeah. Email is such an antiquated form of communication for teens right now. And
but they don't want us texting. Tell them to read the emails or we're going to start sending texts.
Of course, Matt knows my daughter Fiona, MPH class of 2016, just graduated from Bucknell. That was a little dig from him to me.
Oh, sorry. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I didn't notice that. Sorry about that.
Yeah. And so Fiona has told me more than once that I need to pick up my Instagram game. And there was a recent survey just released by Niche of 31,000 current high school seniors, and like 85% said they do all their college searching via Instagram. So maybe, Matt, you and I need to pick up our Instagram games. We're not meeting them where they are.
That is for sure.
Just saying.
I have not heard of this. I have not heard of this internet thing. What do you speak of?
So listen, I do know that some of my current senior parents and students are a little concerned that the last year's class, my son Gavin was in that class at MPH, the great class of 2020, which, you know, had their second half of their senior year disrupted by COVID, and it was a tough time. That many of those students would end up deferring their enrollment and actually didn't show up on college campuses this past fall. My sense of it, Matt, is that was not really the case, and then not every kid took a gap year, in part because during COVID, I'm sure the parents were thinking, what can you do in a gap year during COVID? Probably your best option is to try to get to the campus and you know, or do it virtually and what have you. Is it your sense that a lot of the spots for this class of 2021 are not being held by those kids that deferred from last year's senior class?
Yeah. I actually think that's another thing that people worry a lot about, but I don't think it's going to match the reality. I actually think colleges are going to be more aggressive than less aggressive going into next year. I mean, you already spoke to kind of the financial challenges that we're all under, and the the room and board that we lost in the spring, and the, millions of dollars we're spending on testing, and the changes. Like any student who came to Union this year was offered a single if they wanted one. I mean, there are some huge financial implications to what has just happened. And while we're up in terms of students who have deferred, there's no guarantee that anyone who stepped out of their progression at these colleges is coming back. Like if and so we certainly hope they will. We think they plan will be, but there's no guarantees there. So I actually think colleges are going to be pretty aggressive about making sure that they got a healthy incoming class to reset some things as they go.
Well, and as Matt mentioned before, and it's kind of the final thing that I'll say before we move on to some recommendations going forward, is that college admissions is always unpredictable. And this year feels maybe a little more unpredictable than in past years, but it's always unpredictable. Every year, there's some students who are admitted to colleges that kind of surprise me, and it's a happy outcome. And then there's always a couple of disappointments where, gee, I thought for sure that student would be admitted, and for whatever reason they weren't. And that's just the reality of the business. We need to accept that. There's no real hard and fast guarantees. So I think it will be unpredictable this year, and we'll see what ways it is unpredictable.
Great.
Cool. All right. So just a few things to think about going forward, and then we'll open it up to questions. I think that Matt would, and I'll look forward to hearing what he has to say about this, but, I really try to impress upon my students that at its core, the most essential piece of a college application is your high school transcript. What kinds of courses did you take within the context of what was available to you at your high school, and what kind of grades did you earn, particularly in your last couple of years of high school when you're closest in time. It's not rocket science. What kind of high school student were you? What kind of classes did you take? What kind of grades did you earn? And certainly with so many students not reporting test scores, that may take on a slightly added importance.
Well, in that, like the reality is most high school students, there's a fair amount of consistency have I frozen up on you, Will?
No, I can hear you, Matt. You're fine.
Good, okay. Sorry. There's a fair amount of consistency from year to year. And so the people who are going to feel robbed by the spring term are those who are about, poised on the meteoric rise that they were about to take off. Like they weren't going to be the student, and then all of a sudden they were going to be sparked with the intellectual passion and flourish. And so they lost a little bit of time. So knock them dead, first term senior year. I mean, like there's plenty of time to make up for it. It's like that one quarter will not cloud the whole picture.
Yeah. Another aspect of the application that I really spend a lot of time talking to my students about is their presentation of their authentic selves to the college. I am constantly reminding them to not think about, what is this college looking for, but rather, what do I want to tell colleges about myself, about what I care about what I'm passionate about, what I'm interested and excited about, why I want to go to college, why I want to study the things I want to study. And I think increasingly, certainly before COVID, when fewer and fewer colleges did interviews, and now that can be conveyed via an interview, hopefully if colleges offer them, is the writing in the application, the personal essay and any supplemental essays. I'm always reminding students that's your chance to have your authentic voice come through the application, and hopefully the admission officer reading it, it lodges in their brain of, yes, this is the kind of student that we're looking for. Because I remind students that most of the students mostly apply to colleges where they have the academic qualifications to be admitted. Not always, but most of the time. So what's it going to be that makes you stand out if you don't have the big hook of being the star quarterback or, a legacy or what have you? What is it? I often tell them it's, what's your story? What's your voice? How does your voice come in through your application?
I wish I had you as my college counselor. No, I mean, it's dead on. That's exactly what it is. What's funny is I'd be curious how many of the parents and the students kind of really trust that advice. Cause I think people think there's some magical, like I get asked it all the time on panels, like, what was your favorite essay? And I'm like, I really don't have one. Like for me, a good essay is one that connects the dots to the rest of the application or answers a question I might've had in the rest of the application. Like, so it's not like if two different students wrote the same essay, it might work for one and not the other. Like, is it part of their story? I think too many people are looking for the hook. And I was an economics major. There's a difference between causation and correlation. And so there's like a million people who write books about the right college essay. Because I got into X college, this is the essay I wrote. So therefore it must have been, and it probably had nothing to do with the essay. It might've had something to do with the fact that you could dunk a basketball or something else that played into the decision.
Yep. So that's a piece where the students have agency and ownership of that writing in their applications. And that's why I certainly encourage them to dedicate some thought and care to that part of the application. Because I really do think, I remember back in our days at Hamilton, we would often be sitting with two students who looked very much the same, and we had one spot on the admit pool and one on the wait list, and it was often that supplemental essay where we really were taken by how thoughtfully they expressed their interest in pursuing something at Hamilton College, and all of a sudden we could see that student, signing up for their class or joining that club, and the other student kind of just didn't really have the zest in their supplemental, and they ended up with a wait list, and maybe that wasn't the right school for them. So it's also about that matching piece that we talked about earlier. So I guess the other thing I'd want to say, obviously, the great news that we've had, and we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but the really encouraging news we've had about vaccines in the last few days does make it seem like hopefully some travel restrictions could be lifted in the spring. And certainly by next summer, we would hope that families might be able to start go out and about to visit campuses, because I think you and I would both agree that a well-executed campus visit is one of the most important parts of a college search, where students can really kind of get a sense, is this the kind of place, am I looking at the same the kinds of kids I want to spend my college years with? And for the colleges, obviously, you guys are trying to seal the deal, and a beautiful campus like Union's is a great selling point.
I guess I'm going to push back a little bit. Like, I think students are going to make different decisions if they're not able to visit a campus. I'm not convinced they're going to make worse decisions. I mean, because what happens is they get on these college campuses and they make a judgment about the college based on the maybe two people they've seen. Like, it's really hard to love the place if you hated the tour guide, or, or you bumped into a group of people, and so I think it's really hard to really understand a place by the limited interaction you get on a college tour. Like, I just saw it play with my daughter, who got admitted to a bunch of fine places and had to decide where to go without being able to kind of revisit any of them. And I think if what would have happened was, if she went back on college campuses, she would have been on some place and there would have been something, oh my God, I have to go there. Something magical happened at that place. But instead it turned into, I'm interested in languages and science. Check. I want to be able to run, and compete. Check. And so it's going to be a little bit more box checky. So the students have to ask themselves, like, what have I enjoyed about MPH? What's made me successful? What's challenged me? Like, what are the things that make me get my energy and make me strive? And how do I emulate those things? And what am I looking for in addition to those things? I mean, I think a challenge for students coming out of your school is they all say, well, I've done small, I want to go big. Well, they can't help but go big. Union's a small college, and we're, 7 times the size. Yeah, we're like 7 times the size of what they've ever known. And so you got to help them understand it's not just them, because that's the problem, is like, people talk about, like, tell your story. They're like, I don't know what my story is. And again, the brightest kids in the country, I don't know. I'm a high school kid. Like, what do I know? And try to have some conversation. Again, like, that's the lost part of this visit thing, is like, there's something nice about having a kid locked in the car with you as you drive 3 hours to a thing, because eventually they might have to actually talk to you.
Right. And take your earbuds out for 5 minutes.
And so you've got to find, engineer some opportunities. Like, let's just go for a 3-hour drive, even if it's around the neighborhood, and talk college.
All right, couple last things we want to cover, and then we'll open it up to questions. I did want to mention, because I do get asked, Matt, about demonstrated interest. And I do believe, and I'd be interested in your take on it, that still the majority of colleges, when they're reviewing students' applications, want to get a general sense of how interested that student is in attending their institution. And one way they gauge that is, what kind of contacts has the applicant had with the college?
I think it's a little overrated, only from the fact that I think colleges are curious about demonstrated disinterest, and like the kid who's not engaging. So it's not like you can engage a lot more. Like, you're either learning about us or you're not, and if a kid kind of comes to us blind, it's hard for your authentic self to come through, because you don't know who we are. Right. So it's a little riff on what you said, but I think it's more of a, again, like, they've got opportunities to learn about us. Yeah. We hope they take advantage of some of those.
Yeah. So the final piece, and I think we haven't talked a lot about it, and it's an important piece, obviously. And I know with your financial aid background, you know a ton about it. And I referenced that niche survey of 31,000 current high school seniors, by far the biggest concern of that cohort is being able to pay for college. So in this day and age, with the incredible economic impact of COVID, more and more families are really trying to figure out how they can afford to send their child to college. And indeed, I have more and more conversations, even before COVID, with my families that I work with about what kind of merit scholarships do different schools offer, what state universities might make sense to consider because they have a lower price tag to begin with. And, is a 2-year college a good way to go for cost savings to make sure they're ready to move on to the 4-year college later on down the road? So I'm assuming that's a big part of what Union talks to families about is affordability.
Yeah, but I think it's an underused resource. I think, every college on its webpage has to have a net price calculator. There's great general net price calculators out there on websites. People have got to learn what a college is looking at. Like, are they going to qualify for a lot of need-based aid? Are they not going to qualify for a lot of need-based aid? Those are questions they should be asking on the very front end of all this. Don't let it just happen at you, and don't have this conversation in April of a student's senior year. And I'm surprised by how many people, a lot of people don't even do their own taxes, so I get it. But you've got to sit down with these formulas and get a feel for, because if you need financial aid, but the formulas are going to say you're not going to qualify for any need-based aid, then you've got to identify colleges that are either lower cost or give merit scholarships. And then you just develop the list. A lot of nice places do those things. So it's going to shape the kind of list that you work with.
I always remind my families, having the conversation early is a lot better than having it too late when the student's been admitted someplace they have their heart set on, but it's just not affordable. So
I was director of financial aid at Hamilton, and I'd have people in tears in my office in April saying, no merit scholarship. And I'm like, look at the website. Hamilton doesn't give merit scholarships. This is not new news. Now Union does, so just keep that in mind.
Thanks. Okay, I think we've gone on quite long enough, Mr. Malatesta. I think we should open up to questions, Dave.
Yeah, no, that's great. Will and Matt, thank you both so much for what you shared there. We've got a couple of questions. I think we may have touched on some of these, but it would be good probably just to give another response to address this. And what I failed to mention, folks, if you have a question, go ahead and use the chat function to either, write out what the question is, or if you'd rather just say, I have a question, I'll look to see that, and you can go and we'll take you off mute and you can ask the question. But we've got a couple that came in already. And so here's the first one. Are you aware of if COVID-19 has had any noticeable impact on the applicant pool for the fall of 2021? Are more students choosing to explore gap years, exploring community colleges for a year before enrolling in a more traditional 4-year school?
I guess I can answer that. Both Union specific, but then generally, so Union, we're surprisingly up in our early action applications. We're down in our early decision applications for this year. I'm in a virtual conference some afternoons this week, and it's a mixed bag. There's some places up, some places are down. The common application shared some data, and more places than not are down. 60% of colleges who take the common application are down in terms of applications, date to date, and down about 15% in Northeast colleges. So I think places will probably be down. Obviously, what the challenge is to get people to engage with this, as we've been talking about, is how do you, so I think some of this will roll in later. People still want to go to college, and so that will happen, but the overall numbers are going to be down a bit.
Yeah, this was actually a follow-on question. I was thinking along these same lines. How is the process altered by the fact that fewer international students may be applying or enrolled next year?
More room for the rest. The reality is, we know that's going to be a challenge. That's been something that some colleges have relied more heavily on than others. And again, I do think some places are going to be pretty aggressive this year.
have you seen a sharper decrease in application numbers from international students?
Our international numbers are down, no question about it.
Yeah. Okay, great. Another question, any advice on how to help your child decide between schools without the benefits of visiting campus? And I know you did touch on this, Matt, but maybe just a recap there would be great.
I'll jump in, Matt, and then you can follow up. One thing that I've tried to do this year, Dave, and I think it's a useful tool, is to connect with alums of MPH who are enrolled, preferably beyond their freshman year, because for so many students, the freshman year has been very disjointed and they may not even be on campus. So talking to a current college, sophomore, junior, senior who went to MPH, I think that's a really underutilized tool. Obviously, the friend and family network, if you know someone who has a child who's at that school, I really do think that that's a useful way to kind of get some firsthand knowledge of the school from a student. And the other thing is a number of our families, and Matt, I'd be interested to hear what you have to say about this, are doing drive-by visits. As long as they're not, I encourage our families to visit the website, and as long as the college is not saying, please do not come to our campus, even to just walk around on your own, as long as they're not saying you're forbidden to come to campus, if you want to drive by and see what's the town look like, what's the surrounding community, can I walk around the campus a little bit on my own with a self-guided tour? I don't see any problem with that, as long as they're following health protocols, which are very well posted in most college campuses these days.
Completely agree. Good advice. I think that's all good things to do. I think virtually the challenge is, like, I just went to Union and we have a link on our page. It's like virtual experiences, and you go to it and it's got 8 different links. And so at a level, I'm thinking to myself as the dean, I'm like, God, well, how overwhelming could that be? But it's because everyone's gonna be a little bit different. So like, you just gotta get into it. Okay, which one do I like? You don't do all 8 of them, do one of them, and which one did you like? Which one sounds interesting to you? Like, just dip your toes in to start. But I do think, Will, I agree, if you have the opportunity, there's a feel part of it, which just makes people feel good. There's the romance of it and the aesthetics of a place that are helpful to see. So yeah, we've got virtual.
I'd follow up with what Matt is saying too, Dave, that many colleges, even more liberal arts colleges, are doing separate kind of virtual programming. Hey, you want to major in the visual arts, or you want to major in business or engineering. We're going to connect you with students who are studying in that field at our institution. And so rather than these kind of overarching, here's the campus and here are the majors and so forth, the more targeted programmatic virtual stuff, I think, can be very helpful to the students. Say, oh, those are the kinds of students who I'd be in a major with, and I'd be participating in programs with. And I think it's a good way to get a sense of match and fit.
Yeah, that makes good sense. All right, we've got a couple other questions. How do students find out about schools that give merit-based scholarships? Must be on a website somewhere.
You get great college counseling there at MPH. They tell you everything. I mean, no, the catch is there's like no one magical website. It's about, it's really the conversation about this is the kind of place I'm looking at, and hey, Mr. Cardamone, do you know places that are like this? I think Will and his colleagues have some good sense of places that are more aggressive in that space than others.
Yeah, I'm Dave. I'm regularly advising families on schools that kind of fit the general criteria the student's looking for, that in the past have offered merit scholarship to students from MPH who roughly look like their child. And so that's really the best. And as Matt said, it's a moving target. I mean, when I first started working at Hamilton, we offered merit scholarships, and then we went away from it. And, so there's, some schools are a little more aggressive about it. But generally speaking, I can give them good insight based on past, history of students from MPH.
Well, and there's like, this is like, if you can let go of the selectivity tail wagging the dog, you can open yourself up to more merit opportunities. Because the way merit generally works, and I'll use Union as an example, is we offer someone, our largest merit scholarship last year was $20,000. This coming year is going to be $25,000. And we offer that to students who we want them to say no to Williams College. And we're going to say, do you really think Williams College is, $100,000 better over 4 years than Union? And then they go, yeah, I do. And we go, I dare you. Yeah. But if you can look at the next level of selectivity, great, fine, wonderful places. Like don't be apologetic. You got to figure out how you can afford this stuff. So colleges get it. It's just don't think that there's something magical at a place with a 20% admit rate versus something with a 30% admit rate. It might open yourself up to some nice opportunities if you can be open to that.
Yeah.
I want to squeeze in a couple more questions. I'm going to combine this one because I think the concepts are related. Question about how do colleges measure their graduate success in their respective careers? Yeah, so let's go with that one. The sort of attendant question is, where can one find out, can find information about dropout rates, transfer rates, that sort of thing, while they're in for respective colleges?
So there's a good website out there called College Navigator, which is down by the federal government, which gives some good stats, general stats like that. Or just Google the common data set for the colleges you're interested in. You get a bevy of other statistics about the place that you can compare that way. When it comes to outcomes statistics, I don't find there's any great sites to differentiate in that way. I mean, most colleges will have information on it. Money Magazine does a top colleges. I say that only because Union does very well in that ranking. For value, and they use career salaries, or just go to LinkedIn and put in careers, like Union College, LinkedIn, and see what all the alums are doing. But I think what students are going to find is there's a range of places with a lot of really successful alumni. This is just a step along the way. If you come out, if you're successful in college, you're going to have choice. So you want to find yourself to the place where you're going to find success and support and challenge. Not like if I go to one place, I'm be better off in another place. It's where you're going to kind of peak or do your best. Little Union College. Last year we had a session on campus where we had, per capita, we had more Fortune 500 CEOs than any college and university in the country. We had 3 current Fortune 500 CEOs, Union alums who were speaking. And it's just, little Union College in Schenectady, New York. It can happen anywhere. And I don't say that to blow Union's horn. I do that to say, if a student comes to a college and thrives, they're going to have choice.
Yeah. I agree, Matt. First of all, the College Navigator is on Naviance. I have that as a link on Naviance. I do think that's a very useful tool to compare statistics that I don't know how much our families use it, but it is there. Common data set is something I can help people navigate a little bit. But I often find myself talking to families, and it comes back to merit scholarships. Hey, if your child goes to the school that's a little less selective than the most selective college they've been admitted to with this nice scholarship, guess what? They're going to probably be a superstar at that college. They'll probably have opportunities to do research with professors as undergraduates. They're going to feel confident in their classes, and they're going to engage and thrive. And that's usually what leads to great postgraduate opportunities, whether it be, in the career world, in the work world, or in graduate school. So, there's something to be said to attending a college where you really feel like you're ready to go and are confident, and it often leads to great outcomes.
That might be a good final note for this session. Matt, I want to thank you on behalf of our community. I know you and Will are old friends, and it's nice to see that sort of friendship, that relationship. We're really grateful that you had some time for us to share these insights.
Happy to do it.
And Will, this is a little self-serving, but you're a tremendous resource to our school, have been for a long time, and thanks for your continued guidance for our students and their families. This is an important consideration for all of them, and I think you help all of us navigate this with good thoughtfulness about finding really the right match. So
Okay.
good stuff.
Thanks for your support, Dave. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. I think that'll do it for tonight, folks. Thanks to everyone who, was able to join us. And yeah, thanks again, Matt. Will, have a great night, everyone.
Thanks.
Good night, all.
Take care.